on the other side of like the actual Scientology operation, David Miscavige just sort of kind of managed to rise to the top. It's funny because when I say to the top, that sounds like it's very specific and it's very literal. There was a whole echelon of executives. Scientology was never, other than L. Ron Hubbard, was never supposed to be run by one person, ever.
You say that Scientology has no regard for humanity, though, and the symbolic reason that doesn't surprise me is because it's a religion, whatever you want to call it, that quite literally teaches that everyone here is just a prisoner sent here by something else, so it's not even real.
That's right.
So there is no humanity.
That's right. And it gets that exact same train of thought. It goes, she's not your daughter.
Yeah.
You don't give birth to a thetan.
Yeah, that's right.
Your bodies created that body, and then a thetan popped into it. You have no relationship with that thetan beyond that. That's part of the matrix. That's part of the trap. You thinking that your family is so important is part of the trap. Like, that's how sick it is. And that is honestly, I know it's easy for Scientologists to coast through and not actually realize that that really is what their body of knowledge means. And it doesn't really come into focus until it happens to you. Because L. Ron Hubbard talks about suppressive persons and all this stuff. And when you read those policies, you're like, yeah, this makes sense. Because he uses examples like Hitler, not grandma who read something bad about Scientology on the internet. Right? So even as a Scientologist, when I read all the stuff about disconnection and fair game and SPs and PTSs, all that made sense to me. It all makes sense when you think it's talking about something over here. And then they're like, no, we're talking about your wife.
Yeah.
We're talking about your mom. Yeah. And that's why I do what I do.
You do a great fucking job at it. But, you know, when we do these episodes on Scientology, naturally, there's a lot of funny stuff around it for sure, so we get a good laugh. I think humor in life is great. But part of the reason I am so fascinated by this topic and interested in covering it on this show is for exactly what you just did right there. Because it is something that, you know, even if there's only 40, 50,000 people in it, there's 40, 50,000 people who are living under some fucking psycho regime that has no regard not only for their humanity, but for what I think is at the core of meaning of life, which is like love. You know, like they don't want you to feel that, and yet this is the same type of organization that pulls you in because you're going to be more successful doing this. That's why you come in, that's also an emotion too, right? Success, I work hard, I get a good work ethic, I rise up, I do things, and this is helping me do it. So it speaks out of both sides of its mouth in the worst way, because it sucks you in, and then once you're there, it tortures you and tells you that every natural urge you have as a human is not real. It can fuck off, and if you don't like it, we're going to make your life hell.
That's right.
So I think it's a very small price to pay. They're not a nearly big enough price to pay that you're over here with a big YouTube channel ripping them a new asshole every day. But it'd be great if there were like 7,000 channels your size doing it 24/7. Maybe that would like make the full dent that they deserve. Because it's really like hearing a story like that. It's an extremely emotional thing. But I'm sitting over here with a pissed off look on my face because like these are kids in the middle of this. Forget even you guys. Like that's horrible what they did with your mom and you and the parents of your wife. Like that's horrible. But then to have the grandkids be sucked into something that they have no control over, and you know that like her parents loved those kids, but they've been told they're not allowed to do that. And the fact that then they were so deep that they had to believe that. I mean that's trauma, not just for the kids. Like that's fucking crazy to me, man.
And then it goes further, right? So then I first tell my story publicly on Leah Remini's television show in the first season. And what do I get? I get Aaronsmith-Levin.com, a hate website created by the Church of Scientology.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Everyone who went on Leah's show got that.
Yep.
Everyone. And so it's not enough to destroy a family. You then actually have to just try to destroy the person. You have to try to destroy them professionally. You have to try to ruin them utterly. Fortunately, it don't fucking work anymore.
Yeah.
They can't get away with it.
Yeah, people see through it.
They can't get away with it. And, one of the things that I've tried to do once my channel kind of started blowing up is to get as many other former Scientologists as possible on YouTube doing the same thing. It's the one place where you can say it without being censored. You don't have to ask for permission. And then, God forbid, you get a little cherry on top and eventually you start earning some ad revenue. And honestly, it's a huge like, oh, wow. So you don't have to be a martyr to do this anymore.
Yes.
You could actually dedicate yourself to it and encourage other people to. And so we started calling it SPTV. And then we created the SPTV Foundation to help people who are leaving Scientology not have to go through all this on their own. And so we've tried to figure out how to take all this momentum and all this effort and energy and channel it in as productive and helpful a way as possible. Yes. But I still go back to those basic bare bones. I don't give a fuck. All that stuff is great, and we'll do as much good work as we can. I'm here to be David Miscavige's worst fucking nightmare. And if that means making 100 channels like mine, then that's what I want to do. That's why I try to help other people build, other former Scientologists build their channels up as much as possible. Because YouTube is the place where Scientology, they can't stop you. They can't stop you. It's not like they can get a documentary killed. They can get a book killed. They can do all this stuff. They cannot stop you on YouTube. It is hugely powerful.
And everyone sees right through their fake views on their channel. By the way, just want to throw that one out there. What was that one? That was 57 million views or something? Yeah. Yeah. With like 10 comments or some shit like that. It's unbelievable, like the stupidity. But, we keep mentioning Miscavige, and I'm sure we're going to talk about him a lot tomorrow. So I would imagine you're not a fan, fair to say? No. Okay, good. I knew that, but we had to make sure. So if we're flying around with some jokes at Miscavige, that's going to be cool with you?
That's my life.
All right, good. So he is such a fascinating guy to me. He's so easy to make fun of, too. But at the end of it, he's the tip of a spear. He's worse than a mob boss in a lot of ways. And unfortunately, I have to give him this, from a financial standpoint, he seems to be quite crafty at keeping the organization flush. Yeah. But you had mentioned it earlier, and I know Tony had dug into this on episode 210 that we did together about the whole process where he ended up taking over the organization by 1988. But, if you don't mind, can we go through some of that power struggle again for people who didn't see that podcast, and how a young man came to be in charge of this organization when the founder himself had dropped his body?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll do my best. I wasn't there at the time. Yeah. But Dave must have been 24 years old when he took over. So the thing is, when L. Ron Hubbard went off into seclusion, he brought two of his messengers named Pat Broker and Annie Broker. They were the only people who knew where L. Ron Hubbard was for the last 6 years of his life. He had a doctor named Dr. Eugene Denk, and there was maybe a couple other people who knew. On the other side of the actual Scientology operation, David Miscavige just sort of kind of managed to rise to the top. It's funny because when I say to the top, that sounds like it's very specific and it's very literal. There was a whole echelon of executives. Scientology was never, other than L. Ron Hubbard, was never supposed to be run by one person, ever. Not even Pat and Annie were it was almost like L. Ron Hubbard was always very clear that it was committees of people that was supposed to take over running things. David Miscavige had a reputation for just being ruthless at attaining, ruthless and effective at accomplishing tasks he was given. And he did not hesitate to just take out people who he saw as competition. And so, whereas someone like a Mike Rinder would be able to more accurately describe the various organizations that existed at that time and who was at the top of those organizations and what is it that gave David Miscavige his special power that he had at that time. But one thing that I very specifically remember is that David Miscavige was tasked by L. Ron Hubbard with getting rid of all of the pending litigation against L. Ron Hubbard so that he could come out of seclusion. And this was called the Special Project, and David Miscavige was the Special Project IC, or the Special Project in charge. Because that project was so important and all-encompassing, it sort of put him in a position of power over the actual official church structure, if you know what I mean.
Can you pull the mic in just a little bit?
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah.
Good.
It gave him a specific quality of power. And he and Pat Broker were also basically like the bottleneck of information. That's all information had to pass through David Miscavige and Pat Broker. So even all the weekly reports from church management that had to be delivered to L. Ron Hubbard, it's David Miscavige who would take those, meet David Miscavige, a dumpster behind the 7-Eleven. And give it to
time, not a long time.
and give it to Pat, and then Pat would give it to LRH. These people, Dave and Pat together, could manipulate LRH to do whatever they wanted by just feeding him false information about people. They could literally get L. Ron Hubbard to issue orders that someone should be removed from post and assigned to the RPF. Someone who L. Ron Hubbard used to know and trust. And this is the other thing where you go, shouldn't L. Ron Hubbard have been smart enough to know that he had put himself in a position
he was God.
to be right? Exactly. Yeah. And why did he need these secret info dumps? Couldn't he just exteriorize and go have
go over there?
Or couldn't he just telepathically communicate with the OTs that he had put in charge of the church? Like, if you think
You're
about
asking questions below your OTA.
Exactly, you don't have the fucking rank to ask those questions. But this is how David Miscavige rose to a position of power where once L. Ron Hubbard died, he had the connections and power that he needed on the organizational side to eventually get rid of Pat. Now, the way he got rid of Pat was by calling Pat's bluff when Pat claimed to have OT 9 and 10 and 11 and 12 and 13 and 14 and 15.
And Pat didn't make something up. He couldn't give him, the fake tablets.
It would be so hard to make up something that seemed believable.
Enough mushrooms in the world, man. You could do it.
So there was this warehouse, if I'm recalling the story correctly, that all of LRH's stuff was in, and it was like guarded, and this is where Pat claimed he had all the stuff. Well, David Miscavige and Marty Rathbun and Mike Rinder and a whole bunch of other names that Scientologists would recognize basically showed up to this place with like shotguns and everything, right? And said, we have an inside man that has just told us the FBI is about to show up and raid this location. We have to get everything in here out now or it's going to be in the hands of the feds. So they loaded up everything in the warehouse, took it somewhere off-site, and over time went through everything. And once David Miscavige realized Pat did not have the OT levels, he said, "You done, son." And it was only a matter of time before Pat Broker was out of there. Because the truth is, Pat Broker didn't want to run Scientology. He wanted to keep running L. Ron Hubbard's horse ranch. He became a horseman.
Yeah, it was motion. Yeah. Wow.
Some people are ass men, some people are horsemen. And, Pat was just, the people I know who knew Pat was like, he was just always a lazy liar. Like, he was in no position to run Scientology, and he had no interest. He just wanted to keep LRH's money and just living his horse life. So once Dave got rid of Pat, Pat just disappeared. He's alive. He's out there. Man, you should try to find him.
Does he consider himself a Scientologist? No.
No.
Totally away from it.
Nothing to do with it.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was really, there was a couple other people, maybe Janice Gillum Grady. I always forget her sister's name for some reason. What's Janice's sister's name?
Is it Yvonne?
No. Oh, we're both embarrassed.
That's all right.
Janice Grady and her sister. Oh, Terry Gamboa. Terry. There were two people who had worked very closely with L. Ron Hubbard for a whole lot of years. There's two examples of people who perhaps could have been in a position to potentially take over control of the church. David Miscavige just had, he has a lot of energy.
Yes.
And when he needs to, the charisma that we were talking about.
Yeah, we got to, I mean, if you're going to talk about how a guy gets in this position, unfortunately, you do have to give him the compliments of the things that allow him to get there. He definitely has ambition. He definitely has a lot of energy, like you said.
Yeah.
He's ruthless, and he's business savvy in some ways, and when you mix ruthlessness with business savvy, I mean, we know how that looks for sure. Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.